This time last year, I made my first video defending plastic pitches. I made it in response to people complaining about the fact that Reef Rovers play on a plastic pitch, despite the fact that they had just watched us beat Partick Thistle 4-3 in what was an incredibly entertaining game. Since then, we have seen the Scottish Premiership come out and ban plastic pitches, Kilmarnock delay the removal of their pitch, Dundee have their pitch turned into a swimming pool, Bonnyrigg get a points deduction for playing on too great a slope, and a potential legal challenge from lower league sides, who see the ban as a way of denying clubs a chance to move up the pyramid. Seeing as so much has happened since that video, including me learning how to actually edit audio and make videos somewhat decent, I thought I'd revisit the topic and talk about pitches, regulations, and what the common sense solution should be. In my opinion anyway, you are allowed to disagree. Anyway, let's get into the video, shall we? Plastic pitches are currently in place at clubs throughout the pyramid. In the Premiership, only Kilmarnock have one in place, but are planning on replacing it with grass once their training centre is built, something that was meant to be done at the end of this season, but the training centre build has seen delays, which means their plastic pitch will remain for another season. In the Championship, Falkirk, Hamilton, Airdrie, Reef Rovers and Livingston all have plastic pitches, with Falkirk having their state-of-the-art AstroTurf pitch installed in the summer of 2023. League 1 sees Alloa, Cove Rangers, Kelty Hearts, Stenhousemuir, Queen of the South, Montrose and Annan all have AstroTurf pitches, which a certain unemployed manager found to be a disgrace. And in League 2, East Fife, Edinburgh City, Spartans, Clyde and Forfar all have artificial turf. So, of the 42 clubs in the SPFL, 18 clubs have artificial turf for their pitch. Technically 17 is Clyde, Groundshare and Hamilton, but that is still 40% of clubs playing on artificial turf. There are multiple reasons why a club chooses to use AstroTurf instead of grass, but ultimately the main reason is financial. Clubs that have artificial pitches aren't just able to play on the pitch, but train as well, without either having to build separate facilities, something which generally doesn't exist outside of Premiership clubs, or hire facilities from local councils. And it's not just the first team that can use these facilities. Clubs around the country will have a community club side to them, with multiple youth and women's teams falling under the umbrella, and these groups will be able to use the pitch when it isn't being used by the first team. Clubs are also able to hire out the pitch for the general public to play on, as well as to non-affiliated organisations. Starks Park, for example, is used by the Reef Rovers first team, the Reef Rovers Community Foundation, which covers youth teams, senior football, walking football, disabled football and women's football, Train Like a Pro, training sessions for children run by Dylan Neeson and Sean Byrne, and Soccer Sixes, a six-a-side league that runs on a Sunday night. The big advantages of Reef being able to use a pitch that they own, rather than hiring other facilities, is that they get a greater share of the money earned through these initiatives, along with keeping everything in-house. Also, the idea of playing in the stadium of the club you support, or at least your local team, is something that is a huge selling point to kids and parents when it comes to these community initiatives. There is also the aspect of games being far less likely to get called off. Last season, we saw multiple instances of games being called off due to waterlogged pitches, while games taking place on artificial pitches were unaffected. When Reef first played against Dundee United last season, you could see that the Imbiteel burn at the bottom of the hill had burst its banks and was starting to flood the road, yet the game was still able to go ahead. Dunfermline, meanwhile, about 15 miles to the west, had their game called off. Since the COVID pandemic and the return of fans to the ground, the only time Reef have had a game called off was due to a power cut in the area, and other clubs with artificial pitches follow the same trend of having significantly less games called off, if any are called off at all. As Scotland is one of the most reliant nations on gate money, cheers Neil, as well as having one of the highest attendance numbers per capita in Europe and possibly the world, having less games being moved from Saturday 3pm kickoffs to midweek night fixtures is an obvious benefit. More people are able to attend these games as a vast majority of people won't have to worry about work or school, something that rings true for both home and away fans. In the past decade, I've only missed one game between Reef and Dunfermline, and that's because the game was moved to a Friday night game and I couldn't get home from university in time. But I was lucky the game was on TV, so both clubs would have got a financial boost from television companies. Further down the pyramid, that isn't going to happen. It's at this point where we have to talk about the weather. Scotland is a very wet country.
I am shocked! Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
The Western Highlands are some of the wettest areas in Europe, with annual rainfall up to 4.5 metres, or about 14 foot and 9 inches in old money. Of course, the East Coast is a lot drier than the West Coast, but when looking at a precipitation map of Europe, we can see that Scotland is on par with the Nordic countries and mountainous nations such as Austria, Switzerland and Slovenia. Whilst, of course, these nations are more likely to receive snow than rain, it is of no surprise then that in these nations, artificial turf isn't uncommon. In the Swiss Super League, 2 of the 11 stadiums use artificial turf, with 1 more being hybrid. 8 of the 16 grounds in Sweden's top flight use artificial pitches. 12 of 16 in Norway's top flight. 2 artificial and 4 hybrid surfaces out of the 12 in Denmark, and 12 of 14 in Finland. So countries with similar levels of precipitation have plenty of artificial surfaces in their top flights, but it seems that top flight teams here haven't adopted them at a similar scale. It isn't uncommon for hardliners to proclaim that football should only be played on grass, as that is the way God intended it to be. They have a right to that opinion, of course. I'm not some dictator who throws people in jail for criticising surfaces like Livingston's, but players will say that a good AstroTurf is better than a bad grass pitch. Last season, we saw Dundee against Rangers get postponed twice, moving the fixture beyond the split day. Whilst, of course, the main issue is down to inadequate drainage, something that is down to both the club and the council, and which club fixed over the summer, I think it's safe to say that if Dundee had a state-of-the-art artificial pitch, these problems wouldn't have come around and people wouldn't have been complaining about the state of it. A similar thing happened with Motherwell about 15 years ago and were actually warned by the footballing authorities for the state of their pitch, but since then they have relayed and fixed the drainage issues. Going back to Raith, the grass pitch was notorious for just being awful by the end of the season, with winter being brutal as with the wet weather and the low winter sun not being able to dry out certain sections of the pitch. Something called black rot was common. Black rot is a fungal disease that kills the roots and makes the ground stink to high heaven. Getting rid of the grass and replacing it with Astro has greatly improved the matchday experience, let's just put it that way. Another recent issue has come up with Bonnyrigg Rose. Bonnyrigg have been in the SPFL for 3 seasons now, and they are relatively well known for their pitch having a big slope on it.
That is a proud moment, but there's a slope on it.
You're right, it's definitely higher on that side.
The club did have plans to rectify this at some stage, but other matters surrounding the infrastructure came first, such as building a new stand. On the 12th of November, the SPFL put out a statement that Bonnyrigg had been given a 6-point deduction due to the club having their SFA licence downgraded to an entry licence from a bronze licence, due to the said slope. I suppose we get to take part in my favourite activity, reading and explaining documents specifically around the SFA licensing system and what it says about pitches, so you don't have to. No! First, a license is given as part of a national and European regulatory system. Yes, UEFA has a similar system, and if a club can't get one, they can't compete in European competitions for that season. Something which I don't think has happened to a Scottish club. Yet. The licensing system is a way of keeping a minimum standard for clubs at certain levels, mainly focused around club infrastructure. An entry licence is the minimum required to take part in the Scottish Cup, which is why not every club in the non-league system takes part in it, along with being the minimum for the Highland and Lowland leagues. It used to be the minimum requirement for the SPFL, but as of the start of the 2024-25 season, it was upgraded to be a minimum of a bronze licence if you want to compete. In case you are wondering, Banks of Dee, Brecon City, Cumbernauld Colts and East Kilbride are the only teams in the Highland and Lowland leagues with bronze licences as of the 11th of November 2024, with licence reviews happening every April, so expect that number to rise, especially considering the debacle that was had with Bucky Thistle last season, something I also made a video on. Looking at pitches specifically, it is split into talking about grass and artificial surfaces, but for now we're looking at grass. Just like the licensing system, it is split into 4 tiers: gold, silver, bronze and entry. Gold and silver tiers are labelled as good and then either tier name. Bronze tier is labelled as satisfactory, while entry is stated as being where a grass surface is rated below a satisfactory level or where a relevant body or league raises concerns regarding the suitability of a grass surface. It will be a matter for the licensing committee to determine whether the surface meets the terms of the entry criteria. Pitch ratings are scored based on match referees giving the pitch a rating between 1 and 5 on any given match day. If it has received an average rating below 2.6, then the pitch is below the threshold for satisfactory, meaning the club would not be able to get a bronze licence. So it seems pretty cut and dry then. Bonnyrigg haven't been able to keep a pitch in good condition and have therefore been punished accordingly. Well, yes and no. Bonnyrigg put out a statement on the 14th giving out their side of the story and going into a bit more detail on what had happened. In the statement, the club mentions the plans to replace the grass pitch with a synthetic surface in a partnership with the community club, with the plans to have this in place for summer 2025 when funding allows, but they mention that as part of a disciplinary tribunal with the SPFL, they have to have plans in place for this by January 31st. They mentioned that to get to this point, the club have already spent £220,000 over the last 5 years on infrastructure, with upgrades to floodlights, a new away entrance, new seating areas and a new terrace stand being implemented at New Dundas Park. They do mention that they have a crowdfunding campaign going to help raise the required funds, which I have already shared on the community tab, but I'll also leave it in the description. Now, whilst I support the idea of Bonnyrigg getting a brand new AstroTurf for their ground, listing the reasons from earlier, there is a slight issue with getting one. You won't be allowed in the Premiership. Whilst that may be a long way off for Bonnyrigg, it is an issue faced by nearly half of the clubs in the Championship and to some clubs in League One. On the 31st of May 2024, it was announced that Scottish Premiership clubs have voted to ban artificial surfaces from the top flight starting from the 2026-27 season. In the lead up to the vote, 6 clubs created a counter-argument to this proposal, these clubs being Raith Rovers, Airdrie, Falkirk, Hamilton, Cove and Queen of the South. The executive summary breaks down the main points being made, and it's what I'll read out as otherwise we would be here for a while, but again I will link the full document in the description. Point 1 is about how the banning of artificial surfaces would be a mistake in the long run. Point 2 questions the sporting integrity of the ban, saying about how a club winning a league or playoff shouldn't be denied promotion. Point 3 states that clubs would have to spend £1.2 million in order to install a grass pitch, along with spending £1 million on other infrastructure developments. Point 4 states that clubs would lose £310,000 on operating costs. Point 5 states that clubs upon promotion would be essentially relegated immediately, as they would have no budget along with the financial implications of having to replace the pitch surfaces. Point 6 is about the negative effect it would have on women's, community and academy football, and point 7 is about how the ban would have no difference in the standard of surfaces and football in the league as a whole. The document does go on to mention that the ban would have a similar lasting effect as the 10,000 seater stadium rule. Again, something else I've made a video on, but the recommendations made by the paper is what we shall be skipping to. The list of recommendations read as such. An artificial surface cannot be older than 4 years for use within the Scottish Premiership. Only approved surfaces, FIFA Pro or similar, are permitted for use within the Scottish Premiership. This ensures the quality of the pitch is equal to those permitted by UEFA within the Champions League and other European competitions. Only approved contractors are permitted to install an artificial surface for use within the Scottish Premiership to ensure the consistency and quality of the installation. This should include planning, build, design specifications and installation. Every surface will be held to the highest standard through the FIFA Pitch Pro Advanced or similar testing programme. This ensures the quality of the pitch is equal to those permitted by UEFA within the Champions League and other European competitions. Every pitch must conform to an approved pitch maintenance plan, which will include 4 spot tests per year and 2 deep cleans per season. Every surface must have an approved irrigation system. Every surface must use the highest standard of infill. Currently green rubber, however, this will change in the future due to environmental concerns to improve appearance. Any club with an artificial surface must demonstrate an approved method of frost/snow protection, potentially an inflatable bubble or compliant covers. They also add that the cost of maintaining and implementing this plan would be on par with the costs involved in maintaining a grass pitch to Premiership quality, so there wouldn't be any disproportionate costs between clubs using different surfaces. This paper and its recommendations make sense. It means that those who do want to play in the Premiership will be able to keep their artificial pitches, but are held to a much higher standard, meaning we won't see pitches similar to the quality we see at some grounds. I'm looking at you, Livingston. Now, there's a slight issue with this paper. It assumes that there is common sense in Scottish football. The ban went ahead anyway. On the 6th of November, it was revealed that lower league clubs were threatening a legal battle over the ban. The clubs involved are the same clubs from before, plus Livingston, citing that they are prepared to ask an independent arbitration tribunal to review this decision under Article 99 of the SFA rules. This is basically the right to an independent tribunal. So what is the solution to all of this then? Personally, the recommendations from the paper makes the most sense. Clubs can keep using their artificial pitches but at a higher standard. But if we were to go down the route of deciding that artificial turf is the spawn of Satan and God intended football to be played on a grass pitch, any other ideas are a crime against the sport and those who dare to challenge that should face the wall, then the Dutch method is the way to go about it. Coincidentally, something also mentioned in the paper. So, what do the Dutch do differently, aside from activities involving special agriculture? I'm talking about tulips, obviously. Quite a fascinating industry, actually. Seriously, they have a warehouse bigger than the Vatican dedicated to selling tulips. Anyway, in 2023, it was announced that the Eredivisie had voted to ban artificial surfaces in the league. As part of the deal, clubs who qualify for Europe are effectively taxed 3.75% of their earnings from UEFA competitions, which is distributed to the other clubs throughout the top two divisions and is put towards helping these clubs maintain their infrastructure, especially the pitch. There is also a greater distribution of wealth from both the TV deals and UEFA solidarity payments throughout the pyramid. This is something that also makes sense. The financial gap between the old firm and the rest of the Premiership, let alone the rest of the SPFL, is massive. In fact, Celtic's win against RB Leipzig saw them earn more money from a single game than they would get from winning the Premiership. I'm sure Celtic fans with their left-leaning political views will be happy with the idea of a bit more wealth distribution to help some of the lesser fortunate clubs in the country. I mean, for Bonnyrigg to earn what is needed to replace or fix the pitch, they would have to finish second in League One. Oh, you mean Celtic fans turn into massive Tories when you suggest they share their wealth? How about Rangers? Surely they have some money to spare. Never mind. So, if clubs don't want to share their wealth, the plan is simple then. Let clubs keep their artificial pitches, but just have a more rigorous standing for it. As technology moves forward, these pitches will continue to improve, as well as yes, there is an environmental impact in the disposal of said surfaces. This is something that manufacturers are trying to mitigate, as mentioned in the previous paper's recommendations. Whilst there is valid criticism over the injury rate of players who play on these surfaces, especially around non-contact injuries, again, this is something that varies based on the quality of the pitch, which higher standards should help combat. Banning artificial pitches is a stupid, short-sighted idea that will only harm the game, and, like the 10,000-seater rule, will only serve as another form of gatekeeping when we are already in an era where the pyramid and the progression between levels is deemed not suitable for the modern game. Let's face it, if the vote was opened up to non-Premiership clubs, would this have gone through? With 40% of SPFL clubs using them and many non-league sides added to that number, there's not a chance this motion would have passed. There are plenty of more pressing issues in Scottish football. VAR and its effects on lower league referees. Believe me, I have been watching this. The lack of minutes being given to young Scottish players throughout the pyramid, TV deals and wealth distribution. Surely these are more important than complaining about a pitch's surface just because you got beat on one and need an excuse. That's it for this video, and of course I hope you enjoyed. What are your opinions on artificial pitches? Should they be held to higher standards or should they be banned altogether? Leave your opinions in the comments below. As we are coming up to 1 year of this channel being a thing, I plan on doing a Q&A video, something nice and simple to put up just before Christmas. I'll put up a separate community post for you to put your questions in, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Of course, liking, sharing and subscribing are all appreciated, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.